tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasahami. Okay, so it's good to be here with everybody today. And today it'll be a co-talk. I'll give the first half of the talk and then I'll pass it over to Ajahn Nisabho. We're going to be talking about what's called the Upāsakā form. And just to get a sense, who here has heard this word or knows what it means, Upāsakā? Upāsaka? Yeah, it's not so much, it is still in this realm of Buddhist hybrid English that most people don't really, it's not familiar, even in most Dharma scenes. But it is a word that goes back to the time of the Buddha, and it's basically just the word for a lay disciple. So as monastics, we're bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, and Upāsika and Upāsaka are the words that the Buddha used for people who are really trying to take on the form of a Buddhist follower. And we'll be talking about specifically, we've put together this document called the Clear Mountain Upāsaka Guide, which is on our website. And it's basically principles drawn from various sources throughout the Pali Canon. That's the source of the Southeast Asian Theravada tradition that we practice for how to embody this form. And it's certainly, all of it is very optional. Everything is totally up to you of what you'd like to take on, but it is a way of connecting one's life and one's practice, the form of your life, with this really ancient tradition. The Buddha talked about white-robed lay people, and this is what he was referring to in part. So our guide has about 13 points, and we'll be going through each one of them using pretty much the exact language, and we'll link to this talk for people to reference. But why it's useful is that the Buddha did teach not self. So yeah, this is somewhat philosophical, but it's also just a useful principle that the Buddha taught about the advantage of not reifying a self, not essentializing and selfing oneself or others for the most part. But he also did talk about the usefulness of self-perception. So there's a word samana sanya. Sanya means perception, and samana means a renunciate. So this is something in the Thai forest we practice samana sanyas. So even though there's no essential soul, or there's this principle of not self, still it's very useful for monastics to take on this perception about ourselves. We are renunciants, we are monastics. And having a perception about yourself, especially if you know how to pick it up and put it down at the appropriate times, it's really essential for healthy family dynamics. Having the perception, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a child, I'm part of this family, is very useful. It makes the roles very clear. When you're a teacher, you need to take on certain responsibilities. You need to keep to certain codes of ethics. So this samana sanya is what we really are trying to live up to and take on in a certain way, without making it a huge ego thing that we're clamped and attached to in unhealthy ways. Similarly, this Upāsaka form can be a healthy self-perception that lay people can take on. So the first principle that we highlight in this form is taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, as we all did just earlier this morning. When the Buddha was asked, how is one an Upāsaka? He said, it's just when they've gone to refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. That's the essential foundation for kind of the self-identification, or for it to be meaningful at all, to say, oh, I'm an Upāsaka, I'm someone who's trying to live a Buddhist life, is taking these three refuges. And really what that means The totality of what that means for each person will be slightly different. And each one of those refuges, as I mentioned earlier, will change and mature and develop over time as you really try to live this. So these 3 refuges can be considered almost an orienting of your life. So as monastics, we physically orient our lives around the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. We live in huts that have a shrine, and every morning the first thing we do is we'll bow to the shrine 3 times, to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Before going to sleep, we do the same thing. So no one is born with a refuge or born with an inherent orientation in life. Either you've picked one up just from your family, your society, haphazardly or unconsciously, or it's been foisted upon you in some way that you didn't totally choose, or you can actively decide what your refuge is going to be. And this is what the Buddha suggested, is taking on this idea. What is a refuge? A refuge is something which is safe. And when you practice the Dhamma, we're internalizing principles of safety, both for ourselves and, as Ajahn Nisabho mentioned, these are great gifts, these 5 precepts. We're giving safety to the people around us. This is what a refuge is. So it's safety and it's orientation in life. Buddha is the historical Buddha, but he's also the Buddha is the principle of awakening. It is possible to transcend greed, anger, and delusion. That's what the refuge in the Dharma is. Refuge in these 4 noble truths, which are basically the causality of unhappiness and the causality of well-being. So you've got the cause of unhappiness, which is the 2nd and 1st noble truths, and you've got the causality of well-being, which is the 4th and 3rd noble truths. That's what we take refuge in. The Buddha taught these psychological truths, which were true at the time of the Buddha and true now. So that's what we can bow to if we are taking on this form and if these words become meaningful for you, and would really encourage everybody to do your own exploration, because you're the ones who have to, each of us have to make these concepts meaningful if we're so inclined. And really there doesn't have to be much religiosity involved in this. The principles of awakening and truth, and that it's possible for a human to do that, and the principle of love, these are universal truths. So that's taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The second principle for an Upāsaka, after that essential foundation, is keeping the 5 precepts. So we also did this. And the Buddha said this is how an Upāsaka can be virtuous, is you've taken this initial foundation, okay, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, it's increasingly meaningful. I can aim my life in this direction, aim my intentions through the course of a day, a week, a career, a life in this way. But then taking the 5 precepts, and you can do this in different ways. There are people who recite it every day before they leave their room. They have it until they memorize it. It might be taped up on your wall, and just before you leave your room, you can recite those 5 precepts, or you can do it every week to, you can bow to a shrine in your room if you've got one, and then just reestablish these five precepts. And then also every month you can do them with us, with monastics. So that's the principle of taking the 5 precepts. Undertaking the precept, again, there are no commandments in Buddhism. Buddha wasn't a God figure who says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt, etc. But it's a voluntary practice. I undertake the training, sikkhapadang. Sikkha is the Pali word and the Thai word for education. I'm educating myself. I'm trying to learn how to not kill, how to be harmless. I undertake the precept to not steal, to not commit sexual misconduct, to not lie, to give up intoxicants. So, and this is a training. If we've been thoroughly involved in killing and stealing and sexual misconducting ourselves and lying and taking intoxicants, it can take a while to kind of purge yourself, or to kind of bring some, to really feel solid in these. But when you do, you can trust yourself and other people can trust you, and you're kind of a light in the world. So that's taking the 5 precepts. The third principle you can take on as an Upāsaka, again, all of these are voluntary, especially after that first one, after you've either bowed to a Buddha shrine and said, I take refuge to the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha, or you say it in front of some monastics that you're inspired by, or however you do it. These next 12 practices are just icing on the cake. So we've taken the 5 precepts, hopefully. The third is what we're suggesting is to meditate, bring meditation to your life. And we're suggesting at least 4 hours each week. So that's about 35 minutes a day or 40 minutes 6 days a week if you want to take some day off, if you need to do that. Or if you want to take it to the next level and do 90 minutes a day, 2 45-minute sessions, one in the morning, one in the evening, that can really bring about a lot of change in your life as well. And there are, you're connecting with a tradition. There have been lay people, and certainly monastics, we all live by these. These are kind of the default for all of our rules, can be said to be extrapolated from these 5 basic ones. But there are probably millions of lay people around the world who are also doing these practices. So meditating at least 4 hours each week. So this is good. It's sometimes if you set some kind of daily limit for yourself, especially if you're working, it might be hard to say, okay, I'll meditate for an hour every day or even 35 minutes, but to have a weekly goal, okay, I can make up. If I missed it yesterday, I can meditate twice as long. I can meditate for 50 minutes a day, whatever it is, you can make up, and then just 4 hours each week. So up-leveling. The next principle we can take on is keeping a weekly Uposatha, which is an observance day, emphasizing practice. So from the time of the Buddha, the Uposatha, the whole Buddhist calendar was organized around the lunar calendar. So on the full moon and the new moon and the 2 lunar quarters, still in Thailand actually, and in Buddhist countries, you have the Poya or the Wanpra, where every lunar of those 4 days, people come together and make it special. It's like the Christian and Judaic practice of having a Sabbath. You can make that day holy, bring some holiness to that day. And you don't have to, if you did want and were able to have the flexibility in your life to have it be on a lunar day, then you would be connecting with lots of others who do that. But you can also just observe it on a weekend, Saturday or a Sunday, just to make one day, okay, I'm going to put things down, maybe put your phone on silent, or even better, throw it in a room, close the door, just step away from all the involvements and entanglements of life that really aren't necessary. Humans got by without cell phones for a long time. It was a long time that we got by without these things. So going back to that, see if you can do that. Make the day holy in certain ways. The 5th principle is to engage in a twice monthly confession with a fellow Upāsaka. And it's important to note this word confession. Sometimes even we just say it and it brings up connotations from your and it just, God, I had to, your teachers or your family or your priests or whatever made you go to confession growing up, and it just has all sorts of negative and confined and going in a closet, and there's all sorts of weird things there, whereas it's actually the opposite. The Pali word is avikaroti, so it's not going in a closet. You're not going somewhere to confess to somebody who you might not know that much, but avikaroti is literally an opening. You're opening yourself up because the Buddha said to acknowledge fault and to decide or try to show restraint in the future is growth in the Dhamma. And if you can find a friend, and we will guide, the Clear Mountain Confession Guide, and ways on our Discord server to find someone else that you might be able to do this with. So this is every 2 weeks, and we've got, maybe just get a show of hands if anybody in here has taken on this practice and has for the lay people who have a confession button. And yeah, we've got, okay, a good few people lifting their hands. And yeah, so this is something you can do. As monastics, we do it. It's part of our lives. The Buddha stipulated it, ordained it for monastics. We have to do this every 2 weeks. Is if we've known that we've done something wrong, we meet up with one of our monk brothers monk sisters and confess it to that person. Lay ourselves open to that person. And it's important to remember that these things are confidential, and you really do want to find someone who you can trust, because it's a very tender practice. And fortunately, we do have a lot of people in this broader lay community who are very mature. This is one of the most mature, flourishing groups of lay people who come together of any monastery I've ever met, had the pleasure of interacting with. So explore that. See if you can find someone to do this with. And it can be confessing or laying open, just the 5 precepts, if you had any breaks with that, or other things you're trying to train in. Give up gossiping, for instance. The 6th one is to create a prominent Buddhist shrine in your house. As I mentioned, in most of the huts that we've ever lived in, we've got a shrine. It can be just a little Buddha statue, or it can be pictures of the teachers who we respect. And just having that in your house it can be the center of your house. It's very nice. In our huts, it's as soon as you open the door, usually, the shrine is right there. It's the first thing you see. Again, the house, the room is oriented around this higher orientation to our lives that we're trying to cultivate. So what could that mean? And you've got lots of Buddhist examples and many other religions bring in shrine practice. You can think of this as a shrine practice. How can you beautify this physical embodiment of how you're trying to beautify your life? The Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Typical things you could put on a shrine are, in addition to a Buddha statue or a statue of Guan Yin, the embodiment of compassion, can be candles or incense and flowers. So just beautifying this shrine. And the 7th principle, before handing it off to Ajahn Nisabho, is one which is, it might be the most overtly obvious symbol. And again, all of these are just things you can explore. But the 7th is to wear white in Buddhist spaces, at Buddhist gatherings, or on holy days. So again, as I mentioned, this is something from the time of the Buddha, where the Buddha would speak about white-robed lay people who would come and practice, maybe on that observance day, taking the 8 precepts. So maybe abstaining from food afternoon. As monastics, we've done that our whole lives. A human can survive on just one meal or not eating afternoon. It is doable for people whose health allows it. Not lying on a high bed, and also not adorning ourselves. So this is part of that. So giving up jewelry and makeup maybe for one day a week, or if you wanted to try it for longer, it can be a good practice. But wearing white will kind of connect you with this living tradition of Upāsakā in every Buddhist country. In Thailand, some people will wear a white top and a black bottom, or just white top and white bottom. Similarly in Sri Lanka, similarly in Burma, Myanmar. And just experiment. And it could just be as simple as a white scarf or a white shawl. And it's kind of fun. Halloween? Remember Halloween? This is kind of like a weekly Halloween where you get to dress up as a Buddhist. You get to wear your white and kind of show. And again, no compulsion, and it's not like in-group, out-group, although it is a symbol, but you can just experiment, and we won't at all, it's not about exalting yourself or disparaging others, but it is a way to say, like when I'm in an airport, we wear these robes all the time, We go to sleep in these robes. We're wearing these robes all the time, including in airports and in places where you might not see Buddhist monks. And for the most part, I'm always the only Buddhist monk or nun that I see. But if there's another Buddhist monk there, I see him from like 2 concourses away. He's like 3 terminals away, and I'm like, as a monk, you see me too. You see me, okay. And we know, and there's this kind of symbol, like, yes, yep, same level. Never met him, no problem. Okay, yep, monk, got something. I did it, actually. I met a Tibetan monk, and I gave him a candy bar. 3 weeks ago, I saw him in the airport, and he knew it. We were looking at each other for a while. Which one of us is going to say hello first? And it was me, because I had a candy bar. But that's what these symbols do. So wearing white, it's very normal in a Buddhist country to do this, and you can just do it on a holy day, on these Uposathas, maybe when you come here, and it doesn't have to be super flashy white. It doesn't have to be, the brightest white you've ever seen, or the whatever. It's not about show, but it is a symbol. And as monastics, when we live in these, we're basically living in the flag of the Buddha, and it is a reminder, like we have to act like monks when we're wearing these, and we wear them all the time, so basically we're always having to act like monks. And similarly, when you're wearing the white robe, if you take this on, it's a symbol, and it can be a forcing function for yourself. You might think, I was going to go and think about, you definitely don't want to steal while you're wearing white robes. Yeah, you're easier to spot, and it's just totally uncool. Off-brand, everybody. Stealing in white robes, inappropriate. But just something to explore. And we've got 6 or 7 more of these principles, but I'll pass them on to Ajahn Nisabho.
Thank you, Ajahn. If you'll have to take one thing from this talk, it's to not steal in white. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being, oh my gosh, I left my Catholic upbringing for this, to 10 being, okay, yeah, I could landing all right. Where are people at? Feel free to show hands if you want. You can put them right here if you want. Okay. All right, we're hitting some good numbers there. So to say that Ajahn Kovilo did a beautiful job there, but just acknowledging these are interesting waters for us to navigate, presenting this. Many people in the West are coming from upbringings where they had belief structures which were sometimes held in not the most skillful ways. Many come to this space just wanting to feel like they can put down all that and come into a space where they feel completely welcome and safe no matter what. And we hope you all can continue to feel exactly that way. And yet these are, like Ajahn Kovilo said, the Buddha didn't give commandments, but he did give skillful means and structure. And as we begin to meditate more and take on this practice, a profound alchemy in the heart begins. And as that's happening, there's a lot of shifting which can happen. And a lot of our former values and forms and goals, friendships, relationships, all these things begin to shift really dramatically. And a human being can only take so much entropy at one given moment. Only so much kind of uncertainty. And so what these structures are these just ancient ways of structuring a life, if you want, where it can help hold that transformation. It can be a crucible. So the next one is learning basic Buddhist chants and ceremonies. In one wonderful book called The Loss of Ceremony, I think that's what it's called, the author mentions that ceremonies are to time what home is to space. Ceremonies are to time what home is to space. They allow us to frame moments in our lives with significance, gravity, with timelessness. They connect the conditioned realm to a deeper strata of symbolism, of kairos, deep time, and to a lineage which stretches back 2,500 years. So they can be very meaningful. And there's a lot of beautiful ones. We have links to them on the document, but one really beautiful one is asking forgiveness. And this is just a beautiful thing to do. Ajahn Kovilo and I do it with each other all the time. Maybe he'll often be like closing his door to go to bed, and I'll just knock and ask forgiveness and a few times. So my parents and I do it whenever we leave one another after a visit. We'll ask forgiveness. Ajahn Kovilo and I will do it whenever we visit a monastery, is ask forgiveness. And it's just there's always something we could have done maybe a little better. And it's just a beautiful act of humility and connection. And we started to do it after group Zoom call meetings for Clear Mountain administration, because it's just good. Zoom calls usually have something you could ask forgiveness for. So this is just one of those little skillful means that the Buddha gave us to use. The next are just these chants. There's one called the ETP chant. Who here knows the ETP chant? We've done it 108 times every New Year's Eve. It's praising the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And the Buddha said that if one is afraid, one should begin to chant this. And I know monastics who their whole life is just keeping this chant going constantly, day after day, and recollecting the qualities of these refuges. In our interview with Ajahn Kalyano talks about one monk at Wat Phu Jongam, a monastery in western Thailand, who encountered a tiger on the path and froze, and then just started to chant this. And the tiger just gently, slowly walked around him. And he said, "Iti so Bhagawa," and then began to run faster and faster, "Iti so Bhagawa," until he was gone. And this is a powerful thing to keep our hearts stable. And it's a powerful samadhi object. The Buddha also, in the suttas, the devas, the angels, are always singing, or they always speak, almost always, in verse, in poetry. And you don't know from the pages whether it's them reciting poetry or singing, but there's something beautiful about, we don't have the same liturgy that Christian traditions do generally, but we have these beautiful chants that are ancient, that ground us, and which touch kind of this deeper part of the heart. So learning them can be a really sweet way of remembering every morning, every evening, or during your day, coming back, and they can be a useful anchor in the midst of that. The next thing we have is to read part of a sutta every day. And in this, the Buddha's words, people will take on different study programs or attend classes, even after graduating and studying what they need to for their occupation. But to reflect, if you have time to study, what could possibly be better to study every day than the words of the Buddha? There's a wonderful newsletter called the Daily Sutta, and if you sign up every day, you'll just get a sutta in your mailbox, in your inbox, and every day that's how I get to start my day, is reading the words of the Buddha, and just little by little imbibing these. Such a spiritual genius, and his words are still here. Years of teaching until he was 80 years old, constantly instructing different people in different situations, and they're all there for us to read. So it can be really useful to take on a practice of just reading a sutta every day, or at least part of one. The next is every day engage in at least one act of generosity, such as giving a gift or doing one good deed. So who here has heard of the Saraniya practice? Okay. So in Sri Lanka, there's a practice where Sarani means to be remembered. And the practice is before one eats, one makes sure one is given every day. And sometimes it's hard to do before breakfast, but you can do it before dinner. And it can be giving a morsel of food to an animal on the way to work, or I would duck behind, after the meal at this one monastery I stayed at, I would come out of the hall after the meal and find the abbot feeding little bits of bread that he had left over to the line of ants behind the hall. It was so sweet. He had people waiting, but the ants, they took priority this time. But what would it mean to really take that on? It's not actually that hard. What would it mean to bring a few cookies to work every day? Or just take a second, to maybe once every 2 weeks bake a big batch of brownies and then bring 2 or 3 over to a neighbor once a day. Can you carry a protein bar with you, or a few in the car to give out to those who need it? There's McDonald's gift certificates you can have ready. And we have a community member who made a practice of this, that whenever he saw someone who didn't have a house on the street, he made a practice of going over and not just giving them something, but giving them something with 3 caveats or 3 principles at the same time. He would lower himself to their physical level, so crouch down. He would learn their name, and he would touch their hand. Lower yourself to that level, learn their name, touch their hand, and give them something. What would happen in your life if every day this was a prime, one of the most important things you held as sacred, to give every day? That's really good icing on the cake. And if you find that giving material objects or food is easy, but it's time that you're lacking, then that's what you need to give. Find the place where the nerve is, where the self is crystallizing, and find a way to open that hand, because that's where the atta is hiding. So the self. So if you really think, I do not have time for this, can you actually give a call to the person that needs a call that you know could use to hear your voice, and just spend 20 minutes. And how you'll know that this is right is there's these acts of sanctity that when you do them, somehow you find you've gained more time. It feels strange, but you realize that the tightness was largely in your head, and stepping into that sacred space somehow steps you into a place where time is not of the same nature as it was 5 minutes ago. Or giving what was hard to give, and suddenly you realize you're wealthy. And Longpo Cha would say this, that he said, there's no rich people who visit the monastery. And one of the disciples who recognized that all these very wealthy business people came from Bangkok all the time said, what are you talking about? There's wealthy people who come all the time. And Ajahn Chah said, no, the only people who get are people who don't have enough. Giving is an act of affirming you have enough. And there's a wealth of spirit in that moment. And dana, giving, is the first of the paramitas that is listed on the 10. But chaga, the act of relinquishing, releasing, giving, and giving up, it's also a synonym for nibbana, for awakening. This is an act of openness that is relevant from the beginning to the end of the path. The next is to stay at a monastery for 3 nights every year. Once again, just all options, but we really like this one. Who here has gone to a retreat before? Just a normal meditation retreat. Who here has gotten to go to a monastery yet? So, monasteries are powerful. If you've gone on a lot of retreats but have not yet gone to a monastery, I really encourage it. There's Sravasti Abbey. It's just 5 hours east over north of Spokane, Newport. 20 awesome bhikshunis, about 4 or 5 monks. It's amazing. And you can stay at these places for free. It's a long weekend, but what I've seen time and again is people step into these spaces, and there's an ancient language of symbolism of, there's a power there. And Ajahn Kovilo and I go to Abhayagiri, where he ordained and I lived for almost 2 years. And the sense there is immediately you step into that space and the poison gets drawn out of the wound. There's a resonance there that is very hard to articulate, but time and again, I've seen people go to monasteries with doubt and pain and hurt. And within 2 or 3 days, something happens and clarity emerges, or healing comes, or peace. This is often the limiting element in people's practice, is stepping into these spaces that are ancient. As you practice, you become like molten gold. And the mold that's ready to kind of hold that new structure is there. But it is at monasteries, and it's just a really good opportunity. Abhayagiri we recommend, and maybe someday, hopefully someday, soon, we'll have a monastery here for you all. But we really like monasteries, which is why we're trying to build one. So would encourage people. And you can reference that Ajahn Nisabho and Ajahn Kovilo sent you, as long as you try not to burn anything down, behave yourselves, don't steal anything. But it's worth doing. The next is to celebrate one's commitment annually. Just if you orient your lives towards practice, if you try to keep any of these, even if it's just taking refuge, coming to Saturdays, keeping some meditation, just recollect how rare that is. Once a year, once a month, every day, whatever you want. The Buddha said one should reflect at the end of the day, I might not wake up tonight. I could die by scorpion, not in the Northwest, but who knows. I might not wake up. Is there anything that I could have done better? Just as a young man or woman fond of adornment would look at their face in a mirror, in a pool of water, and reflect. And if they saw that their face was clean and bright, and if one reflects that one's own virtue is clean and bright, one is glad and rejoices, training in wholesome states. So every day, can you just reflect what a rare thing it is to be practicing for the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion? It is such a gift, and we can take it for granted when we start to step into these communities and spaces, how rare it is. But rejoice in that. There's a wholesome pride that is worthy and worthwhile to remember. Because as you practice, you will notice the things that aren't quite right, that you haven't quite gotten. And it's so easy to fixate on those things that still we're working on and forget the gentle glow of gold that's beginning below the surface in the heart. And that if you recollect, 2 years ago, I would have gotten a lot angrier there. Or that bruise of embarrassment would have lasted a lot longer. Or I wouldn't have even thought to give up the big piece of cake. Whatever it is, if you reflect, it's changed. That's a worthy recollection. And the Buddha recommended it. It's called Silanusati, recollection of Sila. We're coming to the end, but the final thing we put is to take it up a notch. And we put an exclamation point there to make it extra exciting for all of you. And these are just extra icings, like the maraschino cherry. Yeah? You got it? Good. Okay. I never liked those. So these are some things you can, prostrations, if you ever want to do, Ajahn Kovilo and I both do prostrations full length every morning and just orienting towards the triple gem. It's great workout. It'll make you vacuum because you realize how dirty your floor is. We had one community member start this recently and just reflected he had a bunch of cat litter on his head after the first one. So you never know what this will lead to. Ajahn Kovilo does 56, I do 28, that's 10,000 a year. It's a really beautiful practice, and I start with dedicating the merit of my life to the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, to Avalokiteshvara and the Bodhisattvas, to my mother, my father, to anyone I can think of, to Ajahn Kovilo, because I usually have something to ask forgiveness for. And then I just pray spontaneously. I put intention forward. May I give up anger. May I be worthy of these robes. May I guide my practice and serve the Dhamma as best I can. That's a beautiful way to start your day. It takes about 4 minutes, and you'll get some cardio out of it too. You can do recitations of refuge. We have this on the website, just repeating the refuges of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. That's a beautiful thing to just keep in mind when you're at work or elsewhere to sort of center your heart. We have someone here who does 10,000 a week. It's Kirk. If you look at that counter of recitations of refuge, Kirk is a beautiful contributor to that, but many people here are. Media diet, to really take seriously where you give attention is what affects your heart. And Hegel says that evil lies in the gaze that sees evil all around it. There are things wrong with the world, but how many times do you have to check your phone to know that? Because there are a lot of things that are right with the world too. So media diet, at least wait until you've practiced in the morning before checking the news, and stop checking it after 6 p.m. And 1 day a week, can you not look at news? Just 1 day, people, 1 day. But you can take a bigger step back if you want. But be careful about your media diet, and you could always consider canceling that streaming service if you want. We put that in there, and then we had some comments about maybe taking it out because it might be a bit much, but you can contemplate. Study groups, sign up for a study group. Ajahn Kovilo loves book groups. He's always trying to get me to join them with him. So often. I did one. Mission Majjhima counts. Okay. But it really helps with studying these things to have someone who's really excited about it. And that's honestly one of the biggest gifts Ajahn Kovilo gave me, is he showed me what it was to fall in love with the words of the Buddha in a way that you're constantly speaking to them and reading them. It's hard not to get excited when Ajahn Kovilo is so excited about something. He gets really excited about Pali. So It's good to do. So join in one of the study groups, our Mission Majjhima, etc. Consider becoming a host. We have a webpage called Visitors and Practitioners where you'll find this guide, but it also gives you a chance to just open your home to visitors. And the Buddha listed 6 objects of reverence: the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, training, heedfulness, and the 6th, and this is just a flash of genius once again, is receiving guests, hospitality, which was held as sacred in so many cultures. And when I was a young monk, serious, a bit miserable, my parents would call me and say, "Are you making any friends?" And I'd say, "I'm not here to make friends." And I'd sound really serious. And I'd be meditating, and then I was the guest monk, so I'd get a call or someone would come and get me from my hut and say, "Okay, we had a whole group of people here for retreat. They were unannounced. Can you get them all into huts?" And on one level, you're like, okay, I guess I can't meditate. But when you steer your heart completely to your practice is to make someone feel cared for and welcome, it does something to the heart that's pretty profound. So can you open your home? And we had a community member just recently who talked about her father who had his problems and his blessings like we all do. But one thing he'd do is if anyone needed a ride somewhere, he would always give them a ride right to their doorstep. That's hospitality. And the final one is pilgrimage. And that's that if you ever have the opportunity to go to the 4 holy sites in India, Bodh Gaya, Kushinagar, where the Buddha passed away, into Parinibbana, Lumbini, where the Buddha was born, Sarnath, where he gave his first teaching. Before I'd gone on pilgrimage, I thought it wouldn't affect me much. But you get to the Mahabodhi temple where the Bodhi tree is, and it's like seeing a rip in reality. There's a resonance that echoes out of there, and you see hundreds of Tibetans bowing, full-length prostrations day after day, 12 hours a day. And you hear chants from Burmese and Thai and Tibetan and English, and you realize you're part of a lineage that goes back 2,600 years. And you're not alone in this, and that's worth a lot. So I have written at the end of this, no pressure. So no pressure, but we just wanted to give this to you all if you decide it's useful.
หันตมยังตมคาถาสาธุกรังกถามเส Sadhu, 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 anumodhami.
So we do have time for comments and questions. Just encourage people to be open, and if this brought up anything for you that you feel you'd like to discuss with Ajahn Kovilo and I now or later, just know that we're always open to talking about any of this. Matthew, warning.
I don't know that this is a general Upāsaka question, but I noticed I've been well known for my news fast for several years on and off, or I've kind of stuck to it, except for this past week when there was good news. How do you manage that? I was thinking this is nearly as bad as diving in when it's bad news to kind of celebrate what I consider to be good news, and I don't know. It seems like attachment in either way.
Thank you, Matt. And I'll tie that into our shared interest. Ajahn Nisabho and I do actually fast from food quite a bit, and any kind of fasting, whether you're doing a vigil, sleeping a little bit less, or fasting from food, fasting from media, it's good to not see it as a deprivation, to find some way to make it actually, to see the joy in it, see the potential for clarity. So I love actually fasting from food because there's like an energy, my body reacts to it in that way. And similarly, just framing it as giving up, if you don't yet have the carrot to go along with that stick of just giving something up, then it can feel like you're giving something up, like you're starving. Whereas our shared interest, the Sariputta study groups, so people can go online and on the Clear Mountain Monastery website, we've got a list of what we're calling Sariputta study groups, which are basically, as Ajahn Nisabho mentioned, these book groups. And I think we have 5 or 6 right now. 4. You can start your own.
I'd love for you to start your own.
Yep. Yeah, and they're just great, of smaller or larger sizes, in person and online. And that's a great way, if giving up the reading of that which is actually unhelpful, if you find that reading news actually is just depressing and you can't do anything about it, versus this reading something which is actually fulfilling, can be a great way to fill that, what seems like at first a hole.
Well, I think I would, a little bit different question that I articulate very well was exercising this reduced exposure to the vicissitudes of public life or whatever it is, but then abandoning that when there's your side starts to win.
Yeah. Shit. No, it's, once again, most people look at some news in their lives, and yeah, you get the bad and then you get the good, and it's 2 sides of the coin, and as long as you have some wisdom around both, it's good. Talk to Matt about starting a Sariputta study group. But yeah, we do preach restraint with the good and the bad, because it is 2 sides of the coin, it's true. I think we have a question up in front of you, Susan.
Thank you. This feels like a super simple question, I suppose, but I've decided it gets dark this time of year, and it's a little gloomy, and so this is my 3rd year, decided I'm just going to be off alcohol for the 4th quarter, which usually kind of rolls into the first half of the year kind of thing. Sometimes not, a little less seriously, right? But so I guess my question is, in terms of the 5 precepts, right, I'm conscious that intention matters, right? So my question is, how much does the motivation matter? So I'm sort of honoring the 5 precepts, but that wasn't the reason I set down this path, right? So do I need to start over? So I guess that's kind of the question, is how much does the intention here matter?
Yeah, I mean, most of us haven't gone around killing things too much or stealing. It's, like you find yourself falling into these precepts naturally, often, to some extent. And I'd say that if taking them on, it's the beauty of ceremony, is framing them as sacred. I think one of the beauties of art is often, when you take a picture, a good photographer, it's something you'll have seen every day. I think there's one painter who painted the hands of the peasants at the beginning of the 1900s, and, just a hand. But if you frame it correctly with the right light, it becomes sacred. And similarly, that's what these precepts do, is maybe some of these things are things you are kind of doing before, but to frame them with ritual, ceremony, commitment, changes it. It does. It's true. And it eliminates kind of that constant wiggle room that actually can really take a lot of the heart's space and the mind space. Maybe you think about when you will start drinking again, or maybe you're going to a party and maybe you'll have a glass, maybe you won't. You kind of debate it off and on for for a week before you actually go. Like, we all have these, the Buddha called them these like creepers that hold the rotting vines that hold the leg of the quail. And these things that don't look that big from the outside, but actually they're holding our hearts back. So with something like this, maybe the clean cut of like just the determination, I won't drink for however long, it lets you put it down in a way that even unintentional putting aside doesn't. So yeah, the intention can beautify it.
What Ajahn Kovilo pointed out about there being useful personal forms, being a teacher, being a monk, being a parent, that was helpful to me, and I would be curious to just hear more about navigating that realm between letting go of personal forms and knowing when it's appropriate to take them on, and and if at some places there's some intersection where that they come together as kind of one path, or
Yeah, thanks, Hayden. It's good to note that there are different ways the Buddha talked about holding. So people might know the word upadana, usually translated as clinging or holding or attachment. It's in this 12 links of dependent origination, like the causality of how we make ourselves suffer. Basically, we have a pleasant feeling, and then we crave it, and then we cling to it. That's upadana. And then from that, we suffer because we've made a self out of that. We need this thing that we're craving. That's upadana. The root of that in Pali is ada, which means to take on. You're taking on things in a way which is clenched fist, and it has all the pain and pressure and strain of a clenched fist. But there's also samadana. When people were taking the precepts, whoever took those, you say, Panatipata Veramani Sikapadang Samadhyami. Samadhyami is to undertake. And it's the same root, it's to take, but it's intentionally taking on this precept of refraining from killing, stealing. So it's a wholesome way of taking something up. It's a wholesome way of holding. And I think just having, we can think about it, and it's good to understand how we're clinging or holding on in healthy or unhealthy ways. But also just to feel what it feels like in the body, because oftentimes there is that correlate, like when we're clinging to our role of being a monk or a father or a teacher or whatever it is. Oftentimes, if you just look, if you step back from the initial grasping, the body might just contract from its own habitual tendency in that realm, or what we think we're supposed to do, or whatever that is causing that seizing up. Just stepping back and actually, I can hold this differently. I am a monk, I am a teacher, I am a father, whatever it is. And just noticing that, how we're holding it. And it is said, at least in terms of the samana sanya, and I think you could say the same for an upāsaka sanya, the perception of being a monk or the perception of being an upāsaka. These do become natural for an enlightened person. Enlightened person, whether they're layperson or a monk, is there's just no more desire, no compulsion to kill, to steal, to commit sexual misconduct, to take intoxicants. You just don't want to anymore. That's where they converge. We are putting effort into holding things the right way. It's like the Buddha gave this simile. You're holding a baby chick, and if you don't hold enough, then it's just going to fly away. But if you hold too tightly, you're going to strangle it. So we need to hold our practices, hold our self-conception with just the right tenderness, and then it becomes natural upon awakening, and hopefully a lot sooner than that as well. Do you want to add anything?
We will have to wrap up, I think, about now as well. That was a beautiful description, and I might just add that whenever the Buddha talks about keeping good sila, he pretty much always has an addendum where he says one does not exalt oneself and disparage others. Every time. He just puts that little J stroke on. It's really important. And to note, he also talks about one lives in harmony with Dhamma, in harmony with open hands, giving, freely giving. And there's a sense, a lot of the Buddhist language circles around the sense of harmony and almost a kind of attunement. And it becomes very intuitive. You begin to feel when you're walking in line with Dhamma in your chest, and you feel when you divert from it, like very clearly when you break virtue. It's like a rusty nail through cloth. But you'll begin to sense like, okay, when you take on these forms that feel beautiful, you're aligned with something very deep, and there's a profound strength in it. And it's not just ego. There's something in you which is aligning with the deepest strata of your heart and what your aspiration is. And you'll begin to feel very intuitively when that breaks. I asked a Catholic nun once what kept her in robes, and she said, after a time, the voice of God becomes the only thing that matters. And aligning with Dhamma is our way of articulating that, I think.